Welcome back to another crochet tutorial with Cozy Rosie UK, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how to crochet your swatch for the Cable and Crossed Crochet Along. The reason it's so important to make a gauge swatch when you're making garments is to ensure that you're going to get the right finish size. And you'll also be able to substitute a different weight yarn if you want to as well. So for this video, it's just going to be the pattern for the gauge swatch itself, and then there's going to be a separate video where I'm going to talk you through how to adjust the hook size to achieve gauge, or how to substitute to a different weight yarn. I'll pop a link in the top right hand corner here for the second video, and of course I'll pop a link in the description box as well. Now the yarn that I'm using for my cardigan is Sirdar Dual Spun, which is an Aran weight or a worsted weight yarn. It's probably lighter on the worsted weight size, and the hook size that I'm using to achieve my gauge is a 5.5mm hook. Now, of course, to check our gauge, we either need a gauge ruler or an actual ruler, and ideally it needs to be a firm ruler rather than a tape measure, because they can move a little bit more, because it's going to allow us to measure 4 inches within our gauge square. As you can see, this isn't much bigger than 4, but you don't want to make just a 4-inch square. That's not going to be enough to measure within, and obviously you want your whole gauge square to fit on top of your swatch so that you're not adjusting it and trying to pull it about. So if you don't have either of these, a normal firm ruler will be fine. You just need to be able to measure 4 inches both directions. So you'll be measuring the amount of rows and measuring the amount of stitches. So gather your hook size that's recommended for your yarn. I have gone up 1 hook size, only 0.5mm, to achieve this type of fabric. And in the next video, I'm going to be talking through more about how your hook size can affect the drape and the stretch of the fabric as well. It's going to be a very detailed video, but let's get these swatches made so we can work out if we're happy, I am of course, with how this fabric looks. So grab your hook, grab your yarn, and let's make our swatches. This pattern is worked bottom up, from the bottom of the pattern up to the top of the panels for each section of the cardigan. So we're going to be working in turned rows. I've just placed a slip knot onto my hook, and we're going to start by making a chain of 27. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 25, 26 and 27. Now throughout this pattern, I am going to encourage you to work into the back of your chain, or you can of course make a foundation single crochet. If you are happy with how to do a foundation single crochet and you're going to use that on your panels for your cardigan, then you should work a foundation single crochet of 26 to begin. If like me, you're just working into your chain, for your gauge it's not too important if you're working into the bottom, as into the back bump or into the first loop. So I am just going to work into the top loop of my chain. Now we're working 1 row of single crochets to start our pattern. So we can't work into the first chain, so we're starting into the second. We're just inserting, bringing our loop up, yarning over and pull through 2. We're going to work 1 single crochet into each chain across, and at the end of this row we will have a stitch count of 26 single crochets. So continue across and I'll meet you at the end of row 1. So at the end of row 1, you should have 27 single crochets. I'm just going to stretch mine out a bit so it's not quite so twiddly. And we're going to go straight into row 2, where we begin with a turning chain of 3. And in this row, we're going to work our cable stitch. So we skip the first stitch underneath our chain 3, because that chain 3 counts as a stitch. And we're going to skip the next as well. Effectively, we're working into that 3rd stitch along because that first one counts. So we're skipping underneath our chain 3, skipping the next, yarning over, ready to work 1 double crochet. And we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 3, and that counts as number 1. So we're working another double crochet into the next. And once again, a double crochet into the next. So we have 3 double crochets in a row and a skip stitch. We're going to yarn over the hook and work back into this skip stitch, kind of folding over, going in from the front and out the back, yarning over, bringing that loop up as high as our other stitches. We yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and yarn over and pull through the next 2. We want these cable stitches to be hugging the stitches, not squishing them. So it's just like a gentle hug. We're not looking to kind of make them tiny. We're looking to just gather them together to create a bit of a space either side. And you can see that we have worked into this stitch here. It's because we've got something coming out of it. We're going to skip the next stitch, working our next double crochet into the, before we begin working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3. So we skip that stitch there and work our double crochet into the next. So it'll look a bit like that, and you have 1 skipped stitch. We're then going to work the next 2. So we work 1 double crochet into each of the next 2. So we look like we have 3 double crochets in a row and 1 skip stitch. And it's that skip stitch we're going to work our cable stitch into. So we're yarning over, folding down to go in through the front as normal. Yarn over, bring our loop up, pull through 2, not 3, and pull through 2. So again, it's just hugging. It's not overly tight, but not overly loose either. We're going to continue to repeat this across, skipping the next, working 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. That's number 2 and number 3. Before we work back into that skip stitch with our cable. I'm going to continue to repeat that across, and we'll have 1 stitch remaining after we work our last cable, and that's where I'm going to meet you to work that last stitch together. So when we have just 1 stitch remaining, we are simply going to work 1 double crochet into the last. Do double check you've worked your last cable, because it's really tempting to just work into that last stitch, forgetting to go back into that last one. So at the end of this row, we should have 6 cable stitches and a double crochet at each end. Going into row 3, we're going to start with a chain of 1. We turn our work and we are simply working 1 single crochet into the same as our chain 1 and into each stitch across. Our chain 1s don't count as a stitch in this pattern, so we always work into the same stitch as our chain 1. So we're simply working 1 single crochet into each stitch across, avoiding working into that lovely big space as well. And at the end of this row, you should have 26 single crochets. It's really important that we work into our chain 3 at the end of row 3, and just count up the back of your chains. It'll be the tiny one you need to try and get your hook through. It's really tempting to go into that space there, but really to get a nice straight edge, try and get it through that 3rd stitch or the 3rd chain to work your final single crochet. Going into row 4, we begin with a chain of 3, which, as we know, counts as our first double crochet. We're going to skip the stitch underneath that chain 3 because it counts, and then we're going to skip the next, and I've yarned over ready to work a double crochet into the next stitch. So we've skipped one and we're working into the next. And in this row, we're working a crossed double crochet, and we're going to work back into that skip stitch, not where the chain 3 comes out of, but the one just after. So we're just simply yarning over, inserting the hook from the front, out the back, bring our loop up, pull through 2, pull through 2. We're going to skip the next, yarn over, insert into the next again. So we have just that 1 skip stitch, and we're working back into that stitch that we skipped, working over and around the previous double crochet. So continue across, working 1 cross double crochet across each pair of stitches, and it should be looking a little bit like that. And you'll have 1 stitch remaining. Just be careful because that looks like it should be worked into, but there's already something coming out of it. Just make sure you skip 1, work your double crochet into the next before working back into that skip stitch. Continue across, and I'll meet you for our final stitch where we'll just be working 1 extra double crochet. So once we have just 1 stitch remaining, we're simply going to work 1 final double crochet into that last stitch. And at the end of row 4, you should have 1 double crochet each end, and you should have 12 crossed double crochets. Now row 5, we are simply working a repeat of row 3 where we start with a chain of 1 and we're working 1 single crochet into the same stitch as our chain 1 and of course into each stitch across. So continue across working 1 single crochet into each stitch and I'll meet you at the end of row 5. Don't forget to work into the top of your chain 3 at the end of row 4 so that you have a stitch count of 26 single crochets at the end of row 5. Now we're simply going to repeat rows 2 to 5 3 more times and then we can measure our gauge within the swatch that we've made. I'll pop that there and then true Blue Peter style, for those of us in the UK, I can simply just place this over and measure my gauge. So how do we measure our gauge using this gauge square? Very simply, we are looking for 16 stitches and 10 rows within our gauge. So now that we have our gauge swatch made, I'm just giving it a bit of a pull around to make sure that you should in theory block your gauge squares if you're going to block your pattern, which I would recommend you do for this one because it actually will increase the size. So this is the blocked measurements of our gauge, and as you can see I'm just lining it up here at the bottom to make sure that we have the bottom of those stitches showing. Once you've got that all lined up, so it's in a nice parallel line, we can count the number of rows we have in between. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and there's number 10, that row of singles there. And once you've counted your rows, if you haven't made that, please don't worry, the next video will help you adjust your tension. We need to count the number of stitches. So 2, 4, because obviously there's 2 stitches in my cross double crochets. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And that is the gauge that we are looking for in your blocked square. So I would recommend, if you're not used to blocking your gauge squares, it's going to look a little bit different, but this is how many stitches and rows you should have for your cardigan to come out in the finished size. If you were using just a normal ruler, I would do the same. Just place it at an edge of a square. So then we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. If I just stretch that tinily, it's just hit the bottom of that stitch there. And the same with your rows. I would aim to kind of get a row lined up with your ruler. Make sure that it's as stretched as it should be, or pinned. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It's absolutely perfectly just hitting the bottom of that row of single crochets. I don't know if you could see that on camera then, sorry. And essentially that is how you need to measure gauge. So we are looking for 10 rows and 16 stitches within our 4-inch square or 10 centimetre square. If you haven't achieved that with the hook size that you've used, or with you want to substituting for a different yarn, I'll give you a sneak peek. This one has been made with a double knit weight. Obviously that does not match because it's the same number of stitches and it's absolutely tiny. And then I made one in chunky and it's the opposite. It's so much bigger. So if you click the video in the top right hand corner, you'll learn more about substituting yarn for different weight yarns within a pattern and how your hook size can also adjust your finished size of your project as well. So don't worry if you haven't quite met gauge. I'm going to talk to you about it in the next video so that we can learn more about swatching and how important it is to achieving the correct finished size. Thank you as always. I will see you in the next video.